And moderating our panel, the one and only President and CEO of the Pacific Salmon Foundation, Mike Meneer. I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Bridget. Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you, Christine. You gave us so much to talk about, which is going to make getting things started here very easy. Thank you to our panelists for joining us here today. I think we should get started with this question of measurement, because the sessions that we've had over the last couple of years, there seems to be this coming back constantly to, are there tools, are there mechanisms out there that can help us measure better and consistently so that sort of standards can be applied broadly? So that's our first question. But before you answer it, I'd like each of you to just sort of introduce yourself and what you're doing on the ESG front with your particular company or institution, and then just some comments on this notion of measurement and trying to find a consistent standard that would help businesses, consultants at different scales. So let's see, Lise, why don't we start with you? You just got off a plane. You're nice and fresh, right?
You bet. Feeling good. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Lisa Anderson, and I'm the Vice President of Global Procurement at Finning International, and I roll up into global supply chain. Finning's been on, obviously, a journey for a few years now. Our vision is to build and power a better world. And within that, we really started embedding ESG into what we do over the last few years. And in terms of, my focus really has been on, obviously, a sustainable supply chain, and focusing on procurement and the suppliers that we deal with at Finning. But in terms of the question around measurement, it is complex. It's hard to demystify what you can measure and how you report that. And I think that's something that we look at the GRI standards. We look at a couple other, TFSD, I believe, and it is definitely something that we're focusing on trying to measure better, but definitely we have a team that's focusing on that and helping us to demystify that measurement.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lise. Rupa, how about you?
Thanks, Mike, and nice to be here. My name is Rupa Dave, and mentioned partner at KPMG in our ESG and sustainability services area. So I've been in this space for over a decade. Our practice used to be called Climate Change and Sustainability. So to Christine's point, the term ESG has obviously become very front of mind. I spend my days helping clients on developing ESG strategy. So what that really means to them is understanding what the term ESG or sustainability is to their business model, what it means to their industry, and how to use it as a value lever within, again, as Christine mentioned, within their corporate purpose or within their broader strategy. So making it really business relevant. I also spend a lot of my time supporting clients with their climate strategy, so understanding their impact on climate, but also vice versa, the impact of climate on business, so how to manage the risk and consider the resilience of your business in light of a very changing space. But I also, of course, work for KPMG, and I'm an accountant by training, so the question about reporting is near and dear to my heart. Way to give me an easy one to start us off. It is, I could do a whole session on this topic. It's very top of mind for all of our clients. Everyone is really struggling with it. When is this going to converge? When is this going to be consistent? So I think maybe there are nuggets of hope on that front. The International Sustainability Standards Board was created at the end of 2021, which is intending to help provide standards that will make this a bit more consistent. There is broad acknowledgement that we need more consistency in how firms and companies think about impact and sustainability, and they describe this. Regulators are getting heavily involved, which is really changing the game. So I think there's some movement in the right direction, but I think working really closely with a lot of my clients, I'd still say there is very big discrepancies and differences in how businesses report. And I think that's okay at this point. I think we need to acknowledge that if we spend too much of our time worrying about reporting, we'll never actually do the important work. So, I think the way that we work with our clients on that is around transparency, being very clear in those discrepancies, how they're thinking about impact, ESG, and what they're reporting on. And I think, we just have to put these bright minds that we've got in this room together and on the line together to come up with solutions to get better data and move forward on consistency. So I'll stop there because I can keep going.
Great, thanks, Rupa. Kaylee.
Thank you, and it's a privilege to be up on the panel today, and thank you so much for hosting us at the Pacific Salmon Foundation and Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. My name is Kaylee Gattens, and I'm the Director of ESG for the JDS Group of Companies. We are a team of diverse and dynamic resource industry experts and professionals that span the mining, rail, and energy sectors. Some of our key clients include CN Rail, one of our pillar partners here today, all the way from junior mining companies to diamond company, Lucara Diamonds, headquartered in Vancouver, that has an asset in Botswana. ESG for me and our team really is down to our values, and as a business, our vision is shared, and we're partners in achieving maximum resource development value, not only the resources of our natural resources in Canada, but resources in terms of our people and our customers and our impact on community. To echo Rupa and some of the comments from Christine as well, ESG is not new to the mining industry. It's evolved over time. When I started my career and when I first met Mike during my time at Goldcorp, it was termed CSR, and it's evolved now into ESG, and ultimately it's for JDS and for me personally, it's about maintaining a social license to operate. And with regards to the question around measurement, from a JDS perspective, we service such a broad range of clients that we touch a lot of different metrics and plug in as providing fit-for-purpose solutions. And I personally, working in this space today, would like to see it move to more of a standardized and consistent way of reporting. But at this time, with that said, every business and every industry is so different that you do need to take in specific fit-for-purpose considerations when you're looking at KPIs and metrics. So,
fantastic. Thank you, Kaylee. And you've been wonderful to take some calls from me to help give us some advice on how we can plug into the ESG conversation. Rupa, I'd like to come back to you. I think, Christine, you kind of alluded to a paradigm shift or a paradigm distinction, as you put it, between ESG, which is fundamentally a risk analysis exercise, and this notion of purpose. I lead a nonprofit. We're all about purpose. But for businesses, I come from a family that had a wholesale produce company. If my grandfather and uncles were here today to talk about purpose they'd probably, their eyes would roll back in their head. They'd have no idea what the hell I was talking about. And so what I want to get to is, what are you seeing in your companies, in your partners, in the businesses you're advising, relative to an openness to this type of culture shift from just simply measuring, these are environmental, social, governance risks, we got to manage for them, let's get on with it, boom, let's go have a drink, to something much more meaningful and as to just take Christine's word, purpose driven in businesses, and in seeing that as an advantage, right? And maybe there's something in there too, I suspect, around generational change and culture shift within boards and the C-suite of companies. So That's the bag of bolts I'm tossing at you. So Rupa, go ahead, have at it.
It's a big question.
Yeah. I don't
guess-
think I even asked a question. but you know, have fun with it.
That's a good point. I'll make a question out of that.
Please.
Happy to. So I think what I'm going to answer is around the relevance or the interest, I think, from our clients in having a conversation around purpose versus ESG. And I think, actually, I'd argue in a lot of ways companies are much more excited about having a purpose conversation than talking about ESG. Purpose is opportunity focus. It's a differentiator. It's going to resonate with your employees and your future employees. So I think I would almost argue that the purpose or having a purpose is well accepted, particularly kind of at the CEO level. I think every good CEO wants to be able to speak to purpose. And ESG feels a little more like, to your point, a checkbox exercise. So I actually find that my role is to come in and actually describe the connection between those two. And I think the potential loss that you might have is if you only focus on one without the other. So being really high level, purpose focused, that's great. And if you've got a great purpose statement, fantastic. But it's not going to really trickle below the CEO level if you sort of stop at that end. And if you only, again, focus on opportunities and positive impacts, there is a risk and resilience piece that's on the flip side of the same coin, which is how I sort of think about that, an ESG, a thorough ESG conversation covers both risks and opportunities and thinks about the positive impacts as well as the negative impacts. So, I think it is really, changing your conversation depending who it is that you're speaking to, and making sure it resonates with them. So yeah, again, I think it depends on who you're talking to. I find purpose is a great starting point, and ESG can feed into that. I think the flip side is sometimes you do have companies who want to speak on ESG. They don't yet have a purpose. So doing the work on the ground on ESG can lead to a really thorough purpose strategy as well.
Great. Well done. That was great. Thank you. Elise, Kayla, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, I was going to say that I think it's and I think it's around operationalizing it. When I look at what we're doing at Finning is taking it and, as an example, we talked about buildings earlier. We've taken a stance to co-locate with the operation as opposed to having buildings that are separate with head offices and all that, excess building space. So bringing it right to the operation. I mean, I think it does two things. One, it supports the impact from a sustainability standpoint. It also supports looking at, bringing our leadership who would typically sit in a head office in, say, downtown Vancouver, bringing them out to the operation in Surrey so you can be seen and feel and you have that connection with the employees. And I think some of that I think is very relevant in terms of our supplier base. I mean, we're really focusing on, wanting to do business with suppliers that are like-minded, that share the same values. I think that's become very, very important to us, and and that's anything from a small, medium, and large organization. Supporting the communities that we operate in, so ensuring that we're working with suppliers in those areas. So it's really down to the grassroots, as opposed to talking at high level about ESG as ESG, but it's bringing it down into the organization.
That I think Christine used the word levers, as a way to think about how you go about doing this and making it meaningful to your employees, to your investors. And I suspect trying to find, the low-hanging fruit opportunities. We're at the Salmon Foundation also doing an Indigenous strategic plan exercise. And one of the things that's immediately emerged to us is hiring. How can you constitute your hiring approach when you're recruiting, how you interview folks. And there's a lot of good material out there, people to help you do that, and it doesn't take a huge shift of the barge to make something different like that. So those levers to operationalize is what I hear you saying.
Exactly.
Can make this very meaningful and relevant. Kaylee, you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Lise around, and Rupa as well, just on the interconnected nature of, across, from the ground up, essentially, that really drives a business purpose. It's very much more than just words in a sustainability report or a mission statement. I believe it's that consistent message that's lived and demonstrated through the employees across the value chain.
Kaylee, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. You have been working in industry or in companies, mining in particular, other resource companies, where you have leadership, boards, and C-suite that have been around a long time. I'm going to be very diplomatic here. And there's a certain kind of, profile, I think, for certain industries. And how do you get at this, culture shift? How do you get people to, maybe if they haven't been thinking that ESG or CSR or whatever you want to call it, purpose, maybe they haven't thought that way. Not because they're not interested in it or because they don't agree, they just haven't had that opportunity. How do you get folks to come to the table and see the opportunities?
Great question.
Yeah.
And wearing my JDS hat, and again, but predominantly spending my early days and majority of my career in mining specifically, I think the culture shift really comes down to understanding the basics of what makes a project successful or a mine successful. There's the financial capital, the intellectual capital, and most importantly, the trust capital. And establishing and strengthening that trust capital with using an ESG lens really is the most important one, because it's that social license to operate. Mining companies wouldn't be successful today without open, honest, and transparent engagement with First Nation communities, going through the environmental permitting steps and reporting on their progress and success, but also acknowledging when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, and potentially could bring harm to an ecosystem or a community. So having had the privilege of working with different executives, it really does come down to the basics of those three types
Great.
of capital.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, well, let's move to Slido. You've all been sitting patiently, waiting. Sorry, for this side of the room, I'm angled over here. Hello, good morning. You all are beautiful and wonderful people. Let's go to Slido, and I think you know how this works. It's up there, you just log into your mobile device, hashtag bottom line, and then vote on your questions as well. This is, the first one here is, it seems that the governance portion of ESG often gets overlooked. What does that mean for SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and how can we incorporate into our ESG programs? Governance, and the questioner thinks it's often overlooked. How can this be incorporated better into ESG programs? Lise, do you want to, or Rupa, either one?
Sure, I can
Great.
take a stab at that. From a governance perspective, for Finning, what we've done, if I could speak specifically around responsible supply chain, is we've developed something simple like a supplier code of conduct. And that encompasses everything from, safety, diversity, inclusion, and equality. It looks at environmental impact. It looks at modern slavery, ethics, anti-bribery. And so it goes through a number of factors which all form how we want to do business in our communities and how we want suppliers to do business with us. So we're not only measuring or wanting to measure suppliers in terms of, as an example, their diversity and inclusion, what they do at their organization, but we want to ensure that they can report on it, but we can also report on how they're showing up. So with the supplier code of conduct, what we ask is that suppliers have a look at it and conform to that. And we would periodically go out and have that conversation just to ensure that we're not just ticking a box. But I think from a governance standpoint, this is something that we definitely like to share with our smaller and medium-sized organizations to help them
Great.
become a better supplier.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Rupa.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this. I think the G piece is actually a bit more sophisticated already. I think particularly in a market like Canada, we have strong governance systems. So I think that's why it gets left out of the conversation generally. If you think broadly what's incorporated in governance, it's things like ethics, codes of conduct, cybersecurity. Maybe we could argue cybersecurity needs a little bit more work, but those are the types of topics which I think have been top of mind for C-suite and boards for a number of years already. But the maybe emerging governance topic that we do engage with a lot of our clients on is that of ESG accountability. So the oversight of your material or key sustainability topics at the management level, and if you've got a board, I see the question is about SMEs, but who's got responsibility for it, the roles, the responsibilities, the accountabilities, the expectations, so formalizing ESG into your governance structure. So that's maybe the area where we have the most conversations, but otherwise I think, short answer is I think it's just more mature than the other topics.
Interesting. Yeah. So we're maybe in Canada we're a little bit further ahead on that one, and so it may not get as much discussion. Yeah. Okay, good. Kaylee, did you want to talk about governance at all?
Maybe just a couple comments from a mining or putting the mining hat on. Definitely there are policies and procedures in place that help us govern our organizations. I do think there's room for improvement in the area of diversity, inclusion, and equity, of gender, race, religion, disability. And I would say it would be great to, as a next step, to always try to ever evolve and move things forward, is to essentially make the seat at the table and really put those policies and procedures into action.
Yeah, a great point. We're a nonprofit organization, obviously, but and for 37 years we've been around, and it's only been in the last 2-3 years that we've had Indigenous people on our board table. And from where we sit right now in the 21st century, I think, my God, how did the opportunities we missed for those many years? I wasn't there all those years, so don't blame me. But this is, we sort of had a board retreat when we were doing our governance renewal, and we thought, well, we could go hire a consultant to do the plan, and they're going to tell us, put some people on the board, hire some. We just decided to start at the top with appointing board members who are Indigenous with that perspective, and it has been hugely valuable. Is that happening in the corporate sector? I mean, are we making that kind of leap, or are we're not quite there yet?
Me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Checking.
Just jump in.
I think the statistics, and I'm not going to be able to quote this properly, we're making strides in terms of diversity for gender, but I think there's still a lot outside of that. And I think, as Kaylee's just mentioned, diversity can be defined in many different ways beyond gender. So there has been a bit of a blinders on and focus on the gender piece. And then I think if you go a step below the board and to C-suite, we are not making the strides that we need to be making. So absolutely, I think the governance around how we manage these topics needs to be there so that we actually move the dial on it.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's go to another Slido question here. Can you share some interesting examples, maybe each of you could give one, of innovative ESG sustainability efforts or projects within your organizations? Are there any really standout examples?
I can take it, sure. Yeah. Happy to. there's so many because we work on so many innovative
Yes,
projects
yeah.
with our clients, of course. But actually, just sort of going back to one of the comments that Christine made in her keynote, which really sort of resonated with me and is really top of mind for many of my clients is, who gets funded and what gets funded is so key to the implementation and operationalization, I got it there, of ESG. It's a tough one. And so one of, some of the more interesting projects is actually, that we're seeing within our clients is actually finding ways to implement and operationalize and change decision-making when it comes to capital. So of course there's this capital allocation piece on if you're a financial institution. Okay, so that's relevant to them, but most of us in the room are not financial services firms. So how you spend your money as an organization has huge impact, and so of course there's the route through sustainable procurement strategies as Lee's works on, but then there's also capital like decision making and prioritization, particularly for example say in the mining industry where you're very capital intensive, and historically net present value has been sort of the deciding factor. So there's a lot of really innovative ways that clients or some of our clients are starting to think about this, and whether it's through incorporating an internal carbon price into some of their decision making, developing broad-based ESG frameworks that actually support capital prioritization. For me, that's the really exciting stuff. This is when we kind of move from that strategy piece and those vision statements down to, okay, how are we actually shifting how our business makes decisions and thinks about value and shifts it from being a short-term profit to a longer-term view.
And Rupa, are those translatable easily to smaller businesses, or is it just apples and oranges?
No, I don't think it's easy for a large business, so it's definitely not easy for a small business. But then I guess in some ways, the formality around it in a smaller business doesn't need to be there in the same way as a larger organization where we're talking about significant amounts of capital. But essentially, it's getting the information, and I think Christine had a really nice example of like a one-pager on what are the impacts that you're creating. So being able to just understand possible trade-offs in a decision, and it doesn't need to be perfect data, it can be entirely qualitative, but at least if you have that information, it really supports decisions and making your decisions with eyes wide open. Okay, there could be some negative impacts with this on the environmental side, but it's something I'm willing to make because of the social positive. So it's really, at least from my perspective, that ability to make better decisions.
Okay, great, good. Please.
Well, I think there's a number of things that Finning is doing as an organization globally. There's working on renewable energy. Even within Canada, we have a remanufacturing facility. So we take back engines and other core pieces of machinery and remanufacture it. So we reuse many times throughout the lifespan of those components. I would also say that we're focusing on electrification of vehicles, especially in the UK, and bringing that here to Canada as well. There's a number of impacts that way. And then we're really definitely focusing on working more with our communities and with our Indigenous suppliers and ensuring that, in areas we're working with minority-owned companies and really focusing on that as well.
Kaylee, you're dealing with lots of big investment and finance decisions.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more with both of the two panelists today around, there's so many different projects, and much like Rupa, we work at JDS, we work on behalf of our customers, and investing in innovation and investing in technology, I think, is a big part of ESG. One particular example of how what project that JDS is involved with is a Canadian-based energy company that's called Enlighten Innovations, and it's a long-duration energy storage solution that can capture renewable energy for up to 12 hours or more. And the big differentiator here is that a traditional lithium-ion battery can only store 4 to 6 at this time. And so we're exploring new ways of how to capture renewable energy and distribute it to Canada's north and help provide jobs, energy at its core, and engagement for further socioeconomic benefits for the Indigenous communities.
Great. I wanted to follow up on the investment side of things. You have lots of big projects that you're involved with. You're needing to get investment. Are you feeling, and people within JDS feeling, that they're having to sort of level up in terms of their knowledge of ESG and how this whole space works because their investors or clients are demanding this? And how's that going?
That's a great question. I would say there's a lot of information out there around ESG, and so when we approach it and how our group does is really looks at it with a critical lens, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of commitments out there from organizations saying they're going to be net zero by X date, and really going back to a lot of the comments shared today, it's looking at the data. What gets measured really does get managed, and can be found in these publicly traded companies that have the sustainability reports. And from a JDS perspective, I would say that when we look at an investment, and when we work or engage a new customer, or client, or project, it's really around putting our own investment in having some skin in the game if we do really believe it. And that's really been the philosophy from day one, 17 years ago, when the company was founded by our CEO, Jeff Stibbard. So just to succinctly summarize that, I would say, ESG at JDS is really, again, tied to our values, which is our acronym, and it's action, and it's being more than just lip service. It's really walking the talk through skin in the game. And
clearly, they've hired someone with an ESG focus, which is a huge commitment, to create a position devoted to this type of thinking and this type of analysis. Is that beginning to happen more and more in the worlds that you're operating in?
Absolutely, Fitting. We have for sure a focus, and we've had for a number of years a team that comes together and works specifically on ESG initiatives and making sure that it's interwoven within the everyday life of what we're doing. But yes, we definitely have focus on that.
Okay. All right, let's try to, we've got about 8 minutes left. Let's try to get through some more Slidos here. You don't all have to answer every one of them if you don't want to. Should we be normalizing or discussing longer-term reporting in annual reports? Rupa, that seems like one that might go to you.
Short answer, yes.
Okay, great.
Easier said than done, I guess. So depends on what we're talking about. So you've got a Vancity, which is obviously a cooperative. Their annual reporting is for their members. Much easier to discuss a longer-term vision and approach than your publicly traded companies that are reporting quarterly earnings. I think, again, it just sort of try not to repeat myself too much, there is movement in the right direction on this. We're definitely seeing regulators, both in the Canadian, the US in particular, and of course across the pond in Europe, move to integrate these sort of environmental and social factors into annual reporting. So I think that's at least a first step towards thinking about longer term value.
Okay, good. Is Canada looking at going in a more buttoned down approach on this? Embedding it into regulations? Or?
Yeah. So Canadian securities administrators did put out a rule late 2021 on, it was specific to climate, but incorporation of climate into publicly traded companies' annual filings. So that's a pretty big shift in the direction of at least acknowledging that there's these other impacts on business value.
Okay, great. Lise, Kaylee, you can jump in or we can move on to another question, whatever you'd like.
Well, if it's only done annually, it's got to be every day. It's got to be top of mind.
Yeah.
So, I obviously reporting is critical, but we got to make sure that we're reporting on the right things.
Yeah, okay, good. You're passing, that's great, okay. So what are the biggest drivers that encourage leadership to prioritize ESG? We hit a bit on this earlier, and it's clearly got some legs here because it's got 7 people voting for it. How can we influence these drivers to help leadership prioritize ESG?
Do you want to take it?
Well, I think Christine, talked about it. It's got to be part of our objectives right from the very top, and certainly at Finning it is. And I think it's again having a core team that focuses and brings in the different functions and different operations to keep it top of mind.
Yeah.
And it becomes it's not a separate topic. It's something that we do every day. And yes, we have a goal to reduce GHG by 40% by 2027 from our 2017 starting place. But it is definitely part of the day-to-day things that we do.
Yeah. So it has to be bottom up, not just top down.
Absolutely.
Is kind of what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. I mean, we have this in our organization because of COVID, and we have a distributed staff of 40 people across the province. We went to Zoom for our staff meetings, and suddenly we could have a staff meeting not just every month, but every week, check in with people, and the types of suggestions and feedback and input that we're getting on our management team on a whole range of topics is wonderful. I say that because sort of to link back to Bridget and the credential. The more we're getting people trained in ESG and people become experts in the topic, even if they're at a sort of more junior level in the workforce, that's going to, trickle up maybe as well. So any other thoughts, though, on this question about the leadership? How do you get the leadership to prioritize?
I'll try to be succinct on this one. Not my forte.
You've been great all day.
Not my forte. I think we actually get hired, I think, to do this quite often because we're brought in by a team that believes in this, but maybe C-suite doesn't. So, how do you build the business case? And I think a really effective way that we've found is sort of painting the picture of how your business environment is shifting. And I think we've all acknowledged that we've moved from kind of this shareholder capitalism business to a broader set of stakeholders. And so understanding how these stakeholders are, what their expectations are and how they're evolving. So future employees, obviously top of mind, your customers, their demands of you and your business are shifting. So getting the data and feeding that back. Getting the data on what your lenders expect and feeding that back and sort of painting the picture without sort of being judgmental on it and just sort of showing C-suite, this is how your business environment is shifting. How do you want to respond? Like, where do you want to sit in this space? And do you believe that, in the next 3 years, you're going to have to shift how you do business to match that? And we found that to be a fairly effective way to build the business case.
Yeah, always better to be in a proactive position than reactive.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kaylee.
Yeah, that was really well said, Rupa. I think just to what I'll kind of focus on with the 2 minutes remaining is that it's at the bottom line, it's mitigating risk. There is ESG, without taking ESG or factoring, its value into an organization has a financial impact, and I'll kind of leave it at that. And that's been one of the most effective ways to communicate that up to the C-suite.
Okay, good. Well, look, we've got just under 2 minutes left, and I know you all took time to prepare for this. There's got to be something you thought of that you didn't get to say yet. So I want to give each of you an opportunity to either reinforce a point or make a point that you didn't get to make during our conversation. And Lise, maybe we'll start with you and then work our way back this way.
Sure. I think for me, for Finning, it's again operate, that word?
Operational, say it all together,
Operationalization.
operational.
Oh, I'm going to go home and practice that word.
It's all right.
I'm really proud of the journey that Finning has been on over the last few years, and I really believe that, it's more, if we can get away from checking the box, but actually, as it was mentioned earlier, walking the walk, talking the talk, ensuring that we bring all our suppliers along with us, and that we continue to engage with those that aren't quite there, to bring them along, be inclusive, be diverse in everything we do. I think it will help with the impact that we have on our people and this planet.
Great, thank you, Lise. Thank you.
Well said.
Rupa.
I'll actually touch on sort of one of the questions you asked, Mike, which is around, are we seeing companies create roles focused on ESG?
Okay.
So I think what I would sort of leave companies with is the most successful clients we see in this space in terms of really embedding sustainability is that they're not doing it off the side of their desks. So they are giving their people time and space to focus on this. And then I'd also very much emphasize the importance of cross-functional teams. These topics are complex. The levers sit in HR, they sit in supply chain, they sit everywhere. So you need to take a cross-functional approach. And that is both a challenge and an opportunity. You've got folks who've never sat in a room together all of a sudden trying to solve problems together, and it's really interesting to be there and watch that. But it's very important to actually get this work done.
Great point. Thank you, Rupa.
Yeah.
Kaylee, last word.
Basically, as an engineering company, at the core, we're diverse by design, and I think the message I would leave with everyone today is just the importance of education and mentorship as well when we're discussing and evolving the area of ESG on topics such as unconscious bias, Indigenous inclusion, the full gamut. But diversity is a strength and an asset, and needs to be included in the E, the S, and the G.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I feel very grateful and humbled to have been able to sit here with the three of you this morning. Thank you. You're passionate about what you do. That's the most important thing. You're big thinkers at all the scales that this needs to be thought through. I just have a ton of respect and gratitude for the three of you. Lise Anderson from Finning, Rupa Dave from KPMG, and Kaylee Gattens with JDS. Please join me in a big round of applause for our panel.
A really great conversation and lots of takeaways. So thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to Christine for your keynote and for providing some insight and guidance. And thank you, Mike, as well, for guiding this conversation. Very much appreciated. And also want to thank our sponsors for making today's event possible, and for all of you who are joining us virtually or who joins us IRL, as we say. Really nice to see everybody. And our sustainability series continues with climate innovation through transformative technologies on May 10th and circular economy and urban climate solutions on May 17th. And to register for these events, please go to our website. And that brings today's event to a close. Please have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.